Well, my camera keeps falling from its perch, so we're going to start in a new segment. I've got my squares sewn onto my little hearts. I'm going to go ahead and cut them down the middle along that diagonal line. I will press open their little wings. Give it a good squish. And then I'm going to square my geese up to 2.5 by 4.5. To do this, I'm going to put them on my cutting mat with my wing or my goose nose pointing to the left so that I can line the diagonal of my ruler along the diagonal of my goose. And I want the 2.5-inch line to line up with the 2.5-inch, or I'm sorry, 2.25-inch line on the diagonal to hit the nose, the tip of that flying goose block, so that I know that I have a 1/4-inch seam allowance at 2.5 inches. So that's 2.5, that's 2.25. And I want the tip of my ruler to be along this diagonal line, and I want to just rotate it just a little bit so the 4.5-inch line is also on the diagonal line. So I'm lined up with a diagonal on my center line. Let me see if I can do this better. Let's try. Woo. Okay, so I've got my diagonal line lined up. I want my 2.25-inch line on the nose of the goose. I want the 4.5-inch line. Nope. Well, y'all, I can't do this upside down and backwards. I want the 0 line on the diagonal and the 4.5-inch line on the diagonal. And that's where I'm going to take my trim from those sides. Two and a quarter, 0, 4.5. I'm going to trim up the side. I'm going to trim across the top. Then I'm going to rotate it. So now we're looking right. My goose is pointing to my right. I'm going to line my ruler up. Now I have trimmed sides. So I've got my 2.5-inch line along the back. I've got 4.5 inches along the bottom. Yep, I can see my 1/4-inch seam allowance between my nose and the edge. And I am just going to trim up that side and then along the top. One trimmed goose. We can do that one more time. Give that a little finger press. We're pointing to the left. My diagonal is on the diagonal of the goose. My 2.25-inch mark on the diagonal is at the tip of the goose. And I want to just shift it a little bit, make sure that I have my zero on. Back in the day when we did graphing in school, this would be my 0. If anybody is familiar with that, your 0, your corner of your ruler on the diagonal, and your 4.5-inch line on the diagonal. And trim the right and trim the top. Make your goose look to the right. Line up your 2.5-inch line along the back, your 4.5-inch line along the bottom. You can see your 1/4-inch seam allowance. Trim your little goose and trim your goose. You're going to trim up all of your geese, and we will be back to do half square triangles. Pause. Okay, as we go on, I get stringier and stringier. I've got all of my flying geese squared up. We're moving on to the half square triangle units. Those are made with fabrics H and I, your background fabric, And G and I, also your background fabric. My fabric H is the bandana fabric. My fabric G is this red. So you're going to take your H and I and G and I fabrics and place them right sides together. And sew around. Whoops, that was disordered. Lovely. Sorry, got a dog behind me trying to knock the iron off. Because, you know, that's what they do. Try to burn the house down. We're going to sew all the way around the edges. And get a little fabric packet like this. It's easier to see on that side. I've sewn around all of the edges. And then we will take our handy dandy rotary cutter and ruler and make an X so that we get 4 half square triangles, which we will then press open. I'm pressing open away from my background because my background is that denim and it's heavy and it just presses open easier towards the fabric. And these will square up to 2.5 inches each. Easy peasy. Line the diagonal of your square up ruler along here. Wish I had shown it, so I just will go ahead. On the right side, I'm going to line my diagonal of my square up ruler up. This backwards upside down business is for the birds, I tell you what. I'm going to take a tiny trim off the right and top so that we have squared up sides. Rotate it along the 2.5 inch line and then trim again. So I'm going to line my diagonal up. If I move backwards, you can see it just a little bit better. The diagonal of my ruler is lined up with my square. I'm going to take just the tiniest trim along my top and side so I have squared edges. I'm going to flip it all the way around, line that up with my 2.5 by 2.5, 2.5 here, 2.5 here. My diagonal is lined up, and trim. And these were really generous cuts so that we could make sure we got good trims. We're going to do that with all of them, and I will come back when they are trimmed. We're going to lay the block out. Back in a different video so that we can upload short segments. Part 3 will be back.